evening, everyone. Welcome to another Beyond Zero Emissions discussion group. Firstly, we would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Kulin Nations and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We'd also like to thank the University of Melbourne's Energy Institute, MEI, our Zero Carbon Australia project partners for this great venue, which looks like it had a bit of a freshen up, new chairs. Very nice. For those of you that haven't been to one of our discussion groups before, BZE is a climate change solutions, research and communications organisation. Our goal is to transform Australia from a 19th century fossil fuel-based economy to a 21st century renewable powered clean tech economy. Our projects include Zero Carbon Australia research, Repower Australia talks, media work, education programs and much more. We're always looking for more volunteers, so if you'd like to come and talk to us afterwards about that, we'd be happy to talk to you. The discussion group is a forum for climate change solutions with presentations by experts in their field and is held on the first Monday of every month. Tonight, our discussion group covers MEI's new report titled Switching Off Gas, an examination of declining gas demand in Eastern Australia. We're very happy to welcome back Tim Forcey, the report's author and MEI Energy Advisor. Tim has previously presented at a popular discussion group about building efficiency assessments using thermal imaging. Tonight, Tim will present his report on the future of domestic gas across the interconnected Eastern Australian gas market. Gas demand has been declining since 2012 and householders can make significant economic savings by switching off gas heating and switching on heat pumps instead. Tim has been extremely busy talking up his report with many media appearances, including The Age, ABC News, Renew Economy, 3AW with Neil Mitchell, 774 with Red Simons, The Conversation, our very own Beyond Zero Radio, and the list goes on and on. He's made time in his hectic schedule to talk to us. Would you please welcome Tim?
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I refer today as Mad Monday. So if some of you may be aware with the football, when the football season's over for some of the players, then they have the Mad Monday and they go out to the pub or whatever. So some of the football players are celebrating Mad Monday today, including our Geelong Cats. But for me, it was Mad Monday as well because we launched a new conversation article this morning, which is up to like 8,000 reads so far, and there's like 100 comments there. So have a look at the new conversation article on this topic. And then also this morning we met with the Chief of Staff of Victoria's Energy Minister to discuss the report. And then this afternoon I met with the Australian Energy Market Operator and a group of people there to discuss the findings. And tonight we have this. So this was my Mad Monday. I put a presentation together and I entitled it Mad Monday. So there we go. This is the report that Hugh mentioned, and it's available at the MEI website and other places, so you can have a read of that. Now, why do we do this? Well, what happened was, toward the end of last year, we did a study just looking at New South Wales, and there's a BZE radio show on that I taped with Michael. There we were just looking at New South Wales because there was stories going around New South Wales that New South Welshmen were going to freeze in the dark because they wouldn't have access to gas, and that just didn't really seem credible. So we got some funding via the Australia Institute to look at gas demand in New South Wales, and we quickly exposed that it was unlikely that New South Welshmen would freeze in the dark for the reasons that people have been saying. They might go freeze in the dark if they want to, but it wouldn't be for reasons of having gas not being able to be supplied to them. And so we looked at that and said, hey, actually in 10 years' time, gas demand in New South Wales could fall to half of what it's been recently. And it wasn't too long after that the Australian Energy Market Operator, known as AEMO, dropped their gas demand forecast for New South Wales 17%, and they withdrew their concerns that they had published about gas supplies into New South Wales. So there you go. The thing is that we were the only ones talking about demand, and I actually ended up testifying to a New South Wales Upper House inquiry in January, and they wrote a report and they referenced our work 28 times because no one else was talking about demand. People were talking about the supply side. Should we frack? Where should we frack? How much should we frack? And do we have enough pipelines and all that other stuff? And no one really came to the party with a demand story, so we did that for New South Wales, and I think that was quite effective. So then we had another opportunity. We said, well, actually, we should look at all of Eastern Australia because if you're familiar with Eastern Australia, there's a map. The Eastern Australian market, similar to the electricity market in a way, is all connected up with gas pipelines, but the gas pipelines don't run to the Northern Territory and they don't run to Western Australia, so you can just look at Eastern Australia as a market. And so that's what we did this time around, a bit of a bigger study, looking at gas demand for all of Eastern Australia, but coming to similar conclusions that, yes, it turns out, I could ask you, when do you think gas demand in Eastern Australia, the use of gas in Eastern Australia, when do you think that will peak? And in fact, it peaked in 2012, a few years ago. Didn't get a lot of press when it was happening. It's probably a bit of a plateau, but it came down in 2013 and a bit down further in 2014. And the official projections are that it'll keep coming down. It'll collapse in the gas use for power generation. It's going down in gas use in industry because the prices are going up. And also we think, as BZE and the Alternative Technology Association have been saying for a long time, that there's a good possibility that gas use in buildings is going to be coming down quite significantly. So again, by about 10 years from now, 2025, we might find that there's half as much gas being used in Eastern Australia than for the peak of 2012. So that was the study that we've done and what I'll talk about tonight. As was mentioned, it certainly did get some press because we had conversation articles and then The Age picked it up and then we launched a report, and so there's a fair bit of press. This was the #1 Age story on the day for a while. There you can see there's like 1,041 people reading it at that point in time, because they picked up on this idea that people in homes, if you've already got a reverse cycle air conditioner, you can turn that on and use it for your heater and save a lot of money. So that was the key message they picked up on and ran. That's all it takes to get into the news. And so now I've been on the radio from the New South Wales Upper Coast through to Adelaide. It's Geelong FM radio tomorrow at 9:20. And so it's a story that people are interested in. This is some of the other media. This is the new article on the conversation that just went up today, which has some slightly different messages than the last one. But with those, we've pretty well covered it on the conversation in terms of our key messages from this report. That's the other conversation article. It's called My House. Usually the editors make up the titles, and in this case, things were happening pretty quickly. They didn't get around to it, and so I just put a title on there. It's called My House, and the price of gas is going up. What can I do? And I left that as the title, so I thought that was pretty good. Here's another one that talks about actually using hot water heat pumps to heat your hot water, as opposed to a reverse cycle air conditioner, which is your space heater. And that's also been very popular on the conversation. I'll come back to that probably. What's this? This is for tonight. Yep. Or that's the radio show. So again, I just did the BZE radio show on it broadcast on Friday. So you can listen to a podcast there of the radio show about economic fuel switching. And what do I mean about economic fuel switching? These are the key points. So I want you to memorize all these. Gas prices in Eastern Australia have gone up and may continue to go up. The amount of gas used in Eastern Australia, and I'm just talking about the gas used in Eastern Australia, not the stuff that's being exported from Queensland these days. That peaked in 2012. By 2025, demand could fall to half of that peak. AEMO's no longer, raising red flags about gas supply shortages. Between 500,000 households in Eastern Australia can save hundreds of dollars a year by heating their homes with electric reverse cycle air conditioners, and they don't know it. They don't know it yet. You all in this room, we may all know it, but they don't know it. So that's a message that needs to get out to people, and then we'll see some big moves. And ballpark numbers. It's possible that Victorians alone could save $250 million a year on their heating bill from where they're at right now. And people I see on the train, folks I know from the Bayside Climate Change Action Group or whatever, green as. It's like, tell them what I'm doing. And what do you heat with gas? Do you got a reverse cycle air conditioner? Where is it? It's in the lounge room. Is it a pretty new one? It's pretty efficient? Yeah, I bought a good star rating. Do you use it for heating? No. So they just haven't twigged that they can actually save a lot of money. And I'll go through that in a lot more detail. The heat pumps, such as they are, they're a disruptive renewable energy technology, and our report says that we've actually are recovering more renewable energy with heat pumps in Australia than from rooftop solar PV. Nobody worked that number out before. Twice as much. And it could double again, just as people learn. They just, as people turn around and start using it, then it could double again and be way ahead of rooftop solar PV. I call this economic fuel switching. So if the economics are there, that today you should switch to this other heating device that you have in your home. I call that economic fuel switching. So, a lot of people run around talking about renewable energy, and this annoys the people that are keen about energy efficiency. And so, I've kind of trained myself to always put the words energy efficiency in front of the words renewable energy. So if I'm just about to say renewable energy, I'll say energy efficiency and renewable energy. But now I'm saying economic fuel switching, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. And when you think of how gas use in buildings could be reduced very quickly in Victoria, we're not going to do it by insulating ceilings and attics. We will continue insulating attics. We know there's a lot of attics that still need to be insulated. But what could change really overnight is just people getting the word that they need to turn on their air conditioners. So here's the key message for tonight. Turn on your air conditioner. The ATA had already published a report last year, and Craig Memory was here, and he presented on it in this group, that there's no economic need for any new house to connect to gas. There's no economic need for any new suburb to be connected to gas. But what the ATA missed when they put their report together, they were kind of looking at, what do I do if I'm building a new house? Or what do I do if my heating system's stuffed and I want to replace it? What do I do? And they completely missed the message that you can go out tomorrow and turn on your air conditioner and start saving. So, maybe they were thinking we all knew that already, but there's millions of people that don't know that. So we'll come back to questions after, because this is a long story. I've got to cruise through it. So the ATA totally sailed through that. They had the numbers. And so, I worked with the ATA on this project, and so we got the numbers and we put them in our report, but they'd never been published before. So this thing the Age picked up on, that the large Victorian home could save $658 a year by switching over to reverse cycle, that comes from the ATA report that was published back in October, November. But there's another problem with publishing a report that talks about home heating in October, November. Nobody cares. So we're lucky we got involved here as it happens in wintertime, and so people were interested. We almost made it onto television, etc., but by the time we got there, winter was over, and so Sunrise said, come back next year. We don't really want to run a program rubbing people's noses in the idea that they could have saved money last winter. So there'll be more next winter. There's no need to expand the gas grid to new suburbs. Actually, people can start looking at cutting gas infrastructure costs. BZE's been talking for a long time about homes can completely come off of gas. A lot of people talk about getting off the electricity grid, but I don't really know many people that are doing it. But, I know a lot of BZE people who are coming off the gas grid. So as more and more people come off the gas grid, that means that it's more expensive for those that remain behind on the gas grid, and they have to pay the bill for the fixed charges. So you can call that the death spiral of a utility, where people leave using that utility and it drives the costs up for others, which then drives more off, and so forth and so on. So that's something that the operators of the gas grid need to be concerned about, that there's a death spiral coming. We can explore for gas, in the farmlands of Victoria and other places, or we could explore for gas in our lounge rooms and in our attics via economic fuel switching and energy efficiency measures. This actually adds up to big numbers. And if industry is concerned they can't get their hands on gas because we're exporting it all, and when you look at the numbers of what we could stop wasting in buildings, that is a lot of gas that could be made available for industry. You can look at gas reserves. There's the Bass Strait, and will it last 20 years, 30 years, all that out there? How long will that last? And some of AEMO's publications, they said, it eventually runs out, and so we should be thinking about developing new gas fields. Well, if you use less, if you thought you were going to use a certain amount of gas, say by 2032, well, if you're using a lot less gas, will those same reserves stretch out for another 10 years or more after that, obviously. So you can show you a chart on that. And but what this means now is these days we need an integrated resource plan. We can't just look at the supply side for gas. We need to also look at what can be done on the demand side. How can we reduce demand? How can we save people money? How can we make their homes more comfortable and save them money? And so you need to look at gas and electricity in an integrated way, because this fuel switching is going to happen. Yes, as people turn on their air conditioner, they've reduced their gas use, but they've increased their electricity use. So the planners of these systems need to think about this in an integrated way. And overseas, it's known as an IRP, or an integrated resource plan. So that's what we were talking to the government about today. So those are the key points. Hope you've memorized them all. Just some charts. This shows the so-called domestic gas, and this is what I'm talking about, used in for electricity generation, for industry, and for buildings, essentially. And so these are the medium forecasts from the Australian Energy Market Operator. And of course, all of that ignores the elephant. Does anybody see an elephant on this chart? Well, that's the LNG exports up here. So this is the amount of gas that's going to be exported from Queensland from the LNG. So AEMO is showing some decline in the use of this so-called domestic gas, but with our Melbourne Energy Institute scenario that we put together, we could see gas demand dropping a lot more significantly than what AEMO's got there. For those of you that are thinking of doing your own research, so this is where we get some of our information. This is an AEMO website, and there's the National Gas Forecasting Report that they update every year, so that's what we had to look at. These are, so AEMO does 3 projections. They're high, medium, and low scenarios. This solid line over here, you can see that's the actual demand from 2010 peaking in 2012 and coming down, and you can see how much AEMO's saying that gas demand will come down, and at MEI we're saying it could come down even faster, and so you end up here with half as much gas as what you've had before. AEMO's been doing forecasts for a while, and these are the old AEMO forecasts, and those were going for the moon, and the reason there was because those were the days when there was thoughts that we'd use a lot of gas for electricity generation because there'd be a carbon price and we wouldn't be using coal, and the price of gas would never go up because of the LNG exports. But the LNG exports have caused the price of gas to go up. There is no carbon price. Electricity demand went down there for 5 years in a row, and so these forecasts now have completely changed to this area. And we met with AEMO today, and I think they could see some logic that their next round of forecasts, if not this year, the next year will start to come down as they start to get their head around this economic fuel switching phenomenon. Let me just start that with gas for electricity generation. This is what AEMO produces. There's their ideas for what will happen in future with electricity generation. It's coal and more coal, some hydro, some wind, and this little red line here is what they're saying you might use for gas. So you can see that even AEMO is saying that there's not going to be a lot of gas used for electricity generation in the future. And so it collapses. So this is the use of gas for electricity generation in the past, and it just collapses. And there have been some companies built some very expensive power generation facilities, particularly in New South Wales, to use gas to make electricity, and they hardly use them these days. In fact, they're shutting some of them down. This is gas for industry, and these are the different AEMO projections for gas for industry. And so in our scenario, we just use the AEMO low scenario, where you can see gas for industry falling off quite dramatically. And some of that is due to, there's a refinery that's closing in New South Wales, and some other industries that are closing. I mean, this is a big potential political story, because I can't think of, electricity prices were in the news for a long, long time, but I can't think of a single person that lost their job because of higher electricity prices. But this fall off of industrial gas demand is largely because of increased prices in gas, and there will be jobs that are lost as a result of this. But there's jobs gained in the LNG export plants, but there's jobs lost in some of the other industries here, which is projected there. And then this is what AEMO had been saying for gas in buildings. And so we were discussing this with them today, and we see there's, it looks like gas in buildings is already coming down, and we have some reasons to think that there'll be a lot of this economic fuel switching going on, people turning on the air conditioners, and so we'll see less gas used in buildings than what AEMO's been projecting. This is residential gas demand, and really it's a Victorian story. So these are the other states, a bit in New South Wales. But really the big user of gas in residences is Victoria. Tasmania hardly uses any, Queensland hardly uses any. I mean, this was in the BZE Buildings Plan, who did a survey of all this as well. But really where the biggest ground is to be made is homes in Victoria. So that's why it's quite useful that we're in Victoria talking about this. This is some of the numbers, and again, the Grattan Institute produced these numbers, which I think are based largely on the ATA work, but I have to go back and refresh my memory on all that. But again, they hardly talked about this very much in their report. They had a chart. I had to read these numbers off the chart. But what they're saying is that, now this is for all of them, space heating, water heating, cooking. So if you, and it's just the operating costs, so it's nothing to do with the money you have to spend to go switch your appliances. But just if you had, if you're going to switch your appliances anyway because they're all worn out, or you're just comparing different homes that use these different ways of doing their heating and cooking. You can find that gas in Melbourne, you can do it for $1,600 a year, whereas electricity will cost you $600 a year. So that's published information from the Grattan Institute, and that report there. And this is the ATA numbers. And now this is just space heating. And what the ATA was saying for a large home in Melbourne is that you could save $658 if you turn on your air conditioner. So that's what the H got hold of. You can see Canberra, even bigger numbers. So, people in Canberra should definitely be turning on their air conditioners. This is the two different reports by the ATA. One of them looked at the numbers I just showed you, and Craig Memory presented on that. But a question we often get is, oh, hold on. Reverse cycle air conditioners, yes, they harvest renewable energy, but they still use some electricity. What if that comes from brown coal? Is that better or worse than gas? And what this report showed is that as far as reverse cycle air conditioners go, with the assumptions the ATA made about the efficiency of the reverse cycle air conditioner you might be using, they use like a 3-star unit, I think, that you have lower greenhouse gas emissions using the electric reverse cycle air conditioner than you would using gas. Now this is some interesting data for researchers out of data published by the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And it just so happened that last December they published their 3-year update of statistics having to do with home energy. So it's great timing. They do that every 3 years, and so you can go back and see how things have changed over 3 years. But the unfortunate thing is on their website, the ABS says they're never going to do this again because all this funding's been cut for them doing any sort of surveys looking at home energy. So that's an issue. But anyway, what I did here is I just took, for all those homes that use electricity or gas for heating, so I took the wood, put that to the side, took the LPG, didn't count that. And what you find are those homes that use gas or electricity for heating in Queensland, 95% of them are using electricity. Tasmania, nearly the same, are using electricity and not using gas for heating. They're hard, a gas pipeline went down there in recent years, but not too many people have tapped into it, so they're happy using the electricity. And they're all across the use of reverse cycle air conditioners. When I talk about the Victorians don't understand them, or the Tasmanians say, well, what are you talking about? We've been using heat pumps for years, so no news here. And so then it comes on down to Victoria, where people are still using gas. Again, you can see it's a Victorian issue, largely. But the penetration of reverse cycle air conditioners is increasing. So year on year, everybody's putting in more reverse cycle air conditioners. And in South Australia, the penetration's up to 60%. Victoria, not so high, at only 40%. But I could easily see, penetration of reverse cycle air conditioners as summers get hotter in homes, going up to as high as South Australia. So we will be seeing more and more reverse cycle air conditioners going into homes. This is the ABS statistics. We actually subcontracted the ATA to do some modeling as part of this study because they had this model set up to look at a new home or look at a new suburb, and we said, hold on, can we use that to predict this so-called instantaneous economic fuel switching when people go home tonight and turn on their air conditioner? And so, it's always fraught doing those sorts of forecasting calculations, but we had to go anyhow, threw in a bunch of assumptions and came up with this sort of thing in a certain scenario where we saw space heating could drop off quite a bit because people in Victoria get the message and start turning on the reverse cycle air conditioners, whereas hot water is a little trickier to deal with because people will generally replace their hot water system when it fails, and they'll generally put in the same thing that they had because they're cold, wet, and naked, and that's not a good time to be making an energy decision. So in this, with the assumptions we made, water heating didn't move as quickly. Again, those sorts of things could be dealt with if people had some knowledge that they should plan ahead and get some quotes and be thinking about, gee, my hot water heater's pretty old, I wonder what's the best technology to use. And as we see more people with rooftop PV, they may start to think a bit more about using that, their excess solar power either via a heat pump or resistive water heating to just go all electric. So, but again, people need information and a bit of an idea that they should think ahead, and more of the work from the ATA. But this is the sort of modeling that even the Australian Energy Market Operator is not doing. So I encourage them to try and do this sort of bottom-up modeling where you try to work out just what do people have in their homes today and how might that change in the future. Now this is a BZE fantastic piece of work from the buildings plan, and so you either have your head around this already or you don't, but it's showing a old ducted gas heating system like I might have in my house, 20 years old, and when you work out the efficiency, this is the amount of energy that's coming into the thing. A combination of the gas you buy and the electricity you buy to run the fan for a ducted gas heater, and it might end up producing this much of useful heat. And actually, when you work this out, it's like 35% efficiency, which is probably not unusual. But over here, we've got a reverse cycle air conditioner, not the best COP in the world. I think the unit I bought is 5.8, and the unit that Hugh bought is 5.8. And the way that these work anyway is you buy a little bit of electricity, they go outside, they're a heat pump, they go outside and they capture free renewable ambient heat, and that's how you get your 10 megajoules of useful heat. Yes, there can be some losses in the piping and air distribution, etc. But in the end, you're buying this much energy versus this much energy, which is 13 to 1. Now, this is gas. Generally, it is cheaper than electricity, but not by a factor of 13. Maybe more like factor of 2 or 3 or 4. So it's this big efficiency advantage for the reverse cycle air conditioner that means, surprise, surprise to a lot of Victorians, that it's a better way to go than gas. And actually these days, you can find that gas no longer has a price advantage over electricity either. With the new feed-in tariffs that are being announced by various governments at like 5 cents a kilowatt hour, that means that electricity is just about the same price as gas. So there is no point putting your excess solar electricity out onto the grid if you're using gas. You need to find a way to use that electricity in your own home. And people will do that, particularly in New South Wales, where the feed-in tariffs are coming off straight away in 2016. And so I would expect people to be, if they have gas water heating, to be getting rid of that and to be saying, right, I can use my excess solar energy. And a hot water storage tank is like a battery. What are you going to do with that excess electricity? You're going to buy a Tesla? Maybe not. You're going to buy a Tesla Powerwall for your garage? Those aren't actually really terribly available right at the moment either, and maybe not that economic. But you can certainly buy either a resistive hot water storage system or a heat pump if you're willing to spend a bit more. And that's a way of storing your energy. So you would set those up so that the water gets heated in the middle of the day, and it's a way of storing energy to the next day when you have a shower. That came from the buildings plan. This is part of the problem with ducts, and I probably presented this before last time I talked about thermal imaging. But this just showed we got under a person's house, and here somebody's crawled over the duct and smashed it, and here the duct is just opened up, and it turns out that it was this home operated this gas system in this situation for probably about 10 years, because kid that went under the house fessed up to doing it 10 years before. And so they would have just been blowing hot air under the house. And that's the problem with ducts, is that unless you can expect them and protect them and make sure they're in good nick from the beginning, then they can become a disaster. At best, they waste a lot of heat because they're never that well insulated. And at worst, you have this sort of thing going on. Whereas this is some pictures of the 7-star air conditioner that we've got at home. 1 part of electricity produces 6 parts of heating. So in other words, 5 parts of renewable energy go in here. And we're still trying to come up with ways, what's the easiest way to explain these things to people, to government people, other key decision makers, and ordinary people about what a reverse cycle air conditioner does. So it can produce very high heat, and it's 1 part of electricity producing up to 6 parts of space heating, capturing 5 parts of renewable energy that go in there. And that's when I added up all the numbers that all these reverse cycle air conditioners that are today being used for heating, they're probably recovering twice as much renewable energy as all the solar panels out there. In the UK, you get renewable energy certificates for buying one of these. But in this country, governments haven't been terribly keen to encourage people to buy air conditioners. So you don't get renewable energy certificates for these, but you do get renewable energy certificates for one of these, which is a heat pump hot water heater. So again, heat pump hot water here, this is the Sandon, top of the line, carbon dioxide refrigerant, very efficient, operates at very low temperatures. 1 part of electricity produces 4.5 parts of hot water. 3.5 parts of renewable energy go in here. And you get renewable energy certificates for those in Australia. Another photo of the reverse cycle air conditioner. Now here it is, it's winter time, so it's working in heating mode, and it's the refrigerant system that goes around and around. But at this part of the cycle, the refrigerant is at very low temperature. It might be 10 degrees below zero or something, and that's how it can suck heat in from the outside air, even if it's only 1 degree outside. My unit's actually rated for 20 below. I was up in Jindabyne skiing the other week, and at the Jindabyne Caravan Park, we got outside and it was 8 degrees, minus 8 degrees outside in Jindabyne, but we were in the caravan cabin thing the night before, and it was being heated quite successfully by a pretty crappy looking reverse cycle air conditioner, which was obviously functioning at minus 8 degrees. This is the comparison of the solar PV versus where we're at today with reverse cycle air conditioners, harvesting like almost 10 terawatt hours a year of energy. Now this is electricity, this is heat, so this is an apple and this is an orange, but you can put them on the same graph and come to those sorts of conclusions. And this is where the reverse cycle air conditioners could go not too long from now if people just realized that they had them and started using them. So it'll take a while for solar PV to catch up with that, but it probably will someday. This article, Renew magazine, published by the ATA, this article will be in the next version of Renew magazine. And here I go through a lot more detail about an experiment I did in my home in June and July, where for a series of days we would heat with ducted gas, and a series of days we would heat with these new air conditioners that just went in last spring. And so I would heat with ducted gas, try and keep things the same, try and keep my wife doing similar things each day, try and keep the weather, in comparable sort of weather patterns. And I found I could use the gas system to heat the house for $4.80. Our house has double glazed windows, it's got the insulation, so other people might spend $10 a day to heat their house with gas. Well, I worked out it's probably costing us $4.80, and then with the air conditioner it costs $1.50. So that's 1/3. So this is almost like LED versus halogen. It's not like it's just a 10% savings or anything, it's a game changer. And so this is why I'm happy to tell governments and others that they need to tell people about this, because there's big savings can be had. But if you want to do your own home experiment, please do. Hugh and I were just discussing, he's ripped out his gas heater and put in one of these, but it's not too late for him to try and go back and compare gas bills, and maybe we can, because what we need are case studies. It's okay for me to stand up here and say, worked in my house, but if you're out amongst a bunch of people, how can we guarantee it'll work in their house? In fact, we can't guarantee it'll work in every house, but it would be good if we could publish a bunch of different case studies to just describe to people. And that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to build a model, the heatulator, and to get this tool in front of people. It's just a spreadsheet. The ATA, they built the tankulator for water tank calculations. They built the sunulator for solar calculations. This is the heatulator, which needs to be developed. There's only, in this part of it, there's only 4 numbers going in there: your electricity price, your gas price, and your guess at what you think your efficiency of your reverse cycle air conditioner is, and your gas heater. Now, I reckon my gas heater is no better than 40% efficient based on the information that I looked at. We've got the top of the line 7-star air conditioner with a COP of 5.8. So I'll say that it's running at 100% effectiveness. And these are the other important numbers: your gas cost and your electricity cost. And now this doesn't have any of the fixed charges in there, because we're just doing an energy versus energy comparison. You're going to pay for the fixed charges anyway on electricity if you want to run your television, and you're going to pay for your fixed charges on your gas as well until you absolutely get rid of all your gas appliances. So these are just the energy values. And so when I do the numbers, using the electricity is 6 times better. So that's a no-brainer for me. Someone else, maybe they haven't gotten the discounts on their electricity, or it's a different time of day, and they don't have as good of an air conditioner, and they've got a really good gas heater. Maybe it's not ducted, maybe it's a wall heater. In that case, it's better for them to stay with gas economically, but not by law. But that's the sort of tools that perhaps people need to be able to make a decision. Sustainability Victoria has this sort of analysis on a website, and there they look at different houses, different sort of heating systems, and in the end, gas and electricity, they make them look pretty close. But Alan Pears has reverse engineered all that, and one of the faults there is that they used an electricity price of 28 cents. Well, you're pretty silly if you're paying 28 cents for electricity. This is Power Shop, and off-peak I pay 10 cents. During the shoulder period I pay 14, and during peak periods I do pay 26 cents. And this is just the energy-only cost, so this doesn't have any of the fixed charges. The fixed charges are down here. So if you don't know where to find these things on your bill, have a look around with Power Shop. They do try to make it transparent. If you go to Labs, Prices Explained, you can find this chart. And this is for the online saver after the discount, which is what I always buy. And you get those sorts of numbers. So those are the real, and I was looking at another fellow, and he didn't have the different times of use. He just had a flat rate, and it was 15 cents. So that's what I'm saying. Sustainability Victoria using 28 cents is not good enough. Electricity, in some cases, is actually getting cheaper for the energy part that you need to buy. Yeah, they'll be loading on the fixed charges, you bet. But that's not what you look at when you're comparing what you have heating system you should use. The induction cooktop, so that's the last thing you change out, and then you've got the BZE gas-free house. Energy efficiency, as a volunteer and paid home energy consultant, I've probably been in about 300 Victorian homes by now, and you see way too much of this where there's no insulation in the attic, certainly not much in the walls or under the floor, and then some other things, hot water. So this is the hot water outlet, and it goes straight into the ground uninsulated. And the homeowner says, yeah, it does take a while for the hot water to get to the shower, you know. So these are the sorts of things. So there's still plenty, you know, I'm here talking more about economic fuel switching. There's still plenty of work to be done on the straight energy efficiency side, obviously. When you add these things up, and when you look at what, you know, if we could stop wasting gas in buildings to the extent that we currently are, then you save a lot of gas. And so you plot the gas you've saved in buildings versus the projected use of gas in industry. And so you end up eventually practically saving as much gas as what industry is likely to use. So if industry wants gas, yes, you can go frack, but you could also perhaps supply industry with gas in other ways. And that's why we say that the planners need to look at both sides now. They can't just look at the fracking side, they also need to look at other ways to make gas available. And if you don't use as much gas, like I said, in terms of your reserves depletion, so 10,000 petajoules of gas, that's a lot of gas. It's like Bass Strait and thereabouts. And so with the AEMO gas demand forecast, they would use that 10,000 petajoules of gas by like 2032. But with the MEI scenario, if we didn't waste as much gas in buildings as what we have been, then you can just stretch that out, and this curve bends over, and you may end up using that same amount of gas, but not until like 2045. And do any of us really know what the world's going to be like in 2045? Possibly not. And thanks to Alan Pears again. I started talking about gas demand management, and Alan said, what's new is old. Here's from July 1990, the old gas and fuel. They were just about to start having a look at gas demand management, and then they got privatized. And the only known copy is in Alan Pears' basement, so there you go. But I've scanned them, and we're going to upload them to the internet, and then they'll be there for posterity, because even Google can't find these things. Information sources. We have a Aruru Sarara discussion group on Facebook, so feel free to join the Aruru Sarara discussion group. Aruru Sarara is the name of that 7-star air conditioner, but the discussion group is really about running your home with gas or electricity. So we gave it a nice name so you could find it, but we talk about more than just the 7-star air conditioner. The ATA has launched an ebook, Green Home Heating, for like $5 or something if you're a member, and it just combines all the different articles that have been written in the past about that topic. This of course is BZE and Energy Freedom, and Matthew Wright, who some of you would know, he's trying to start up a business called Pure Electric, where he helps people to move to electric devices, such as the air conditioner. So anyway, there's all sorts of different information sources out there these days. And that's it. Questions?
Do you think the death spiral in the gas will negate the death spiral in the electricity?
That it will what?
Will the death spiral in the gas stop the death spiral in the electricity?
Yeah, I see a lot of potential for using more electricity. Absolutely, sure. You know, if homes were 100% electric, then we'd be doing our heating with efficient electricity. We'd be doing our hot water heating, the cooking. There's the electric car. Of course, a lot of that can be self-generated with people putting solar panels on their roof. But sure, I see that. And recently, we had a paper, peer-reviewed paper, just published in the Electricity Journal. So if you want to look at the Electricity Journal, Alan Pears, Mike Sandiford, Dylan McConnell, myself got a paper published talking about the recent history of the electricity in Eastern Australia, 5 years of declining electricity demand in Eastern Australia. But in that paper we talk about how it could turn around if homes use more electricity in the ways that we've described, electric vehicles of course, and industry can do a lot of economic fuel switching. I mean, you don't need to use gas in a dairy or for food processing, and Alan, perhaps you'll want to, we've got some time, you can talk about heat pumps in industry. But you know, you can take this heat pump concept and not just use it around a house, you can use it in, it's a refrigerant cycle basically, use it in the industry and get to even higher temperatures. And so there's opportunity for fuel switching to occur in industry, which could increase electricity demand. So you'd think that crowds like Power Shop maybe, a lot of the businesses are conflicted, AGL, Origin, they sell both electricity and gas. So I can imagine, you know, you got the manager of the gas division and the manager of the electricity division, and they get together in front of the CEO and they all walk away deciding to change nothing because you wouldn't want to muck up the one guy's bonus for the other guy. Whereas a company like Power Shop, if they just sell electricity, you know, why aren't they out there more actively selling what could happen? And also your equipment suppliers, your reverse cycle air conditioner people, they seem to be a bit introverted, and so you don't find them out there really selling their product. You know, I hooked up with a guy on LinkedIn the other day. He's trying to get the story happening more in the UK. And then I saw our article mentioned by a air conditioner sales crowd out in Howland, Victoria. So some of them are starting to pick it up. And I had the fellow that installed our air conditioners came back around the house the other day, and he was interested. So these you know, these companies could go out and sell their products a bit more and encourage people to make the switch.
You never see them. It's not like anyone advertises air conditioners in winter and says, why are you wasting your money on gas?
Yeah, I was thinking of the next article I might write, and it would be something like this. And you know, I'd write it going into summer, and I'd say, don't feel guilty about buying that air conditioner. Buy a good one.
Branding.
Pardon me?
They're immediately branding it as air conditioner.
Yeah.
You're branding it as a summer product.
Correct.
You brand it as a heat pump.
Right.
You say, this just changes temperature.
Yep.
Or a temperature pump, people.
Yep.
Air conditioning should mean that too, really.
Huh?
Air conditioning should mean that too. It doesn't mention heating or cooling.
No, but how do you change 50 years of
I know.
public perception?
I know.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And like Matthew Wright played around with the phrase heater air conditioner for a while, and I couldn't really get that to stick, so I've just really gone with reverse cycle air conditioner. People do know that reverse cycle air conditioners are heaters.
Yeah.
I've kind of picked up on that. So,
But they never use them for it.
but they never use it for heating. Because gas is cheaper,
Yes.
they think. Because gas is cheaper, they think. Yes, so we'll just go across the room.
You mentioned about getting RECs for a heat pump hot water system. At the moment in Victoria, you can't get VEECs if you're going from gas to a heat pump. So you can get the regs, but you can't get the Victorian certificates. What I was advised by my installer was to buy electric hot water service on eBay for $30. Stand up next to it, that would be 100% legal. They can take that one away. But legally at the moment you can't get VEETs for, so if you have gas at your property or you're changing the gas hot water service.
Yes, so one of the faults we had with when we were meeting with the Energy Minister's Chief of Staff today is he said, "Oh, have you guys submitted to this energy efficiency thing that's going on right at the moment?" And I asked him, "When's the deadline?" He said, "Oh, don't worry about it." So we, MEI, need to submit, but I would encourage anyone who thinks they have the expertise to be able to put some logic down on paper about why certain things should happen. I think this current state government is open to these things, so but they do need to hear from people. Otherwise, then like our report, we went in there today. They kind of vaguely were familiar with who we were and what we'd done, but nobody has time to sit down and read these things. So when something actually lands on their desk, then maybe it gets a bit more attention.
Speaking of submissions, I was wondering if you presented this information to the unconventional gas inquiry.
Yeah, I did, sure. Yeah. So I testified.
You're aware of implications of moving away from gas?
Yes, I testified to a New South Wales inquiry in January, and they issued a report and they referenced our work 28 times because no one else was talking about demand. I testified to the Victorian inquiry. They just released an interim report or draft report or whatever it is, and they mentioned our work once, which is fine, because in one sentence they summed up about 5 of our key messages. So again, no one else is talking about what we were talking about. Even the Australian Energy Market Operator, who are the official organisation responsible for demand forecasts, they didn't appear in front of the inquiry. And it's not like the inquiry has a team of researchers that goes out and pulls in stuff. They just listen to whoever fronts up in front of them. And we had to put up our hand, but others didn't put up their hand, so they don't even hear this information. More questions?
If you're replacing your home gas-factored heating system, I guess you put in 2 or 3 perhaps air conditioners rather than one with ducts, right?
Yeah, there's all sorts of options. Join the Aurora Sorara discussion group and we can go on about it for endless hours. It was funny, so we were talking to a key person at the Australian Energy Market Operator today who has been responsible for a lot of their gas stuff. He doesn't use gas for heating, he's got 6 air conditioners. Matthew Wright's had 6 air conditioners for a while. I've got 2 air conditioners now. There's different ways to do it. I was doing a home energy consultation in Glen Iris 3 days ago, and they had 6 air conditioners down the side of the house. So there are different ways of doing it. You'll find different cost structures. And the thing about, if you can close couple your split system with the unit inside the room and the unit outside the house right there, and very short runs of insulated refrigerant piping, then your energy losses are going to be quite small. Some people just don't want to have 6 different units outside the house, or they don't want the unit inside the house, so they might consider a ducted system. And so there I just tell them that they should try to find the best ducts they can possibly find in terms of the R value and the insulation, and also the strength of them, and make sure they're not going to be damaged or run over the next time someone goes in the attic or underneath the floor. But bringing things down through the ceiling is always fraught, because running air conditioning piping around through through the attic space, and in Victoria that's going to be like 80 degrees or something at certain times. That's a bit self-defeating. Can be done. Lots of people do it, but it is difficult for people to come to decisions as to what's the best for their house, either for a major renovation. A bit easier if you're just doing a room here and there.
Plus you're punching huge holes in your roof, in your insulation and in your
Exactly.
and you've shown us before with the camera what the effect of massive holes in your roof from downlining and all that sort of stuff is.
Yeah, so I'd rather not have any holes in my ceiling anymore. I've kind of learned that. If you don't have like a big utility area where you couldn't care less if you got 7 or 8 different machines out there, then these are some of the options that you face. Of course, obviously, coming back to the basics, the insulation, the window treatments, shading the house, All those things are important for bringing your heating and cooling costs right down in the first place. There can be a factor of 2, 3, 4, 5 differences between a home of the same floor space, depending on whether it's had any sort of thermal treatment to it. So that's always step one, and the energy freedom, of course, talks about all those things. Getting the building envelope right, and draft proofing and shading, those things. One of the things then what you find, and my article that's coming out in Renew Magazine will talk about this a little bit, is that you get the folks to come around to give you a quote for air conditioners. And so the guy came around and I got a quote, and he wanted to put in 16 kilowatts cooling. And we ended up buying 6, which that does the job. And again, Matthew Wright was on to me, and Alan Pears, and Matthew's like, Tim, in your house, you're not going to need 16 kilowatts, you'll just need a little bit. So we put a 3.5 kilowatt cooling unit down in the lounge room, and 2.5 cooling kilowatt up in the bedroom. And actually that in the bedroom, it can cool the whole front formal living area. The 3.5 kilowatt out back in the lounge room can heat and cool the lounge room, the eating area, the kitchen, and actually send some heat up the stairs as well. So there we ended up with 6 kilowatts was adequate, and the salesman wanted to sell me about 16. But it may be because our house is better than the average house. Not a huge amount of questions left.
Okay, a technical one with some of these heat pumps. You can run a fan and it mixes the air in a room, or you can run the fan just on a light pump so you don't have this big fan blowing in the room. Does it save a lot of energy by running the fan on a higher speed?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to play around with that and see what works for you. I would say one thing about this particular device that we're looking at here, there's a button there you can push, and it can tell you how much electricity you've used since the period that you've turned it on. So you could start to do some home experiments. If you had a few days in a row that were similar, you could try different modes of operation, keep track of how many kilowatt hours it's using, and then come to some conclusions.
Because across the room, the temperature can vary like 7, 8 degrees. And when you've got the fan running high, it can vary like 3 or 4. So there's so many variables when you're trying to really get down to
That's right.
numbers.
Yep.
I've been running it all winter and I still know very little, I think, because there's so many variables and it's hard to really measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then this particular device throws in another variable, which is humidity. So this Uru Sarara can actually add humidity in the wintertime using a desiccant wheel, which feels really nice and is a really superior form of heating. That's a whole nother variable that next winter, if I have the time, maybe I'll do a whole nother experiment and write a whole nother article. So I think the ATA was a bit annoyed I didn't say much about humidity in this article, but you're right, there's so many variables, trying to sort it all out is a challenge.
In danger of getting a bit off topic here, Tim, have you got anything to say about using a heat pump or water service to drive a hydraulic heating system?
Yeah, Right. So I've heard that sort of thing's possible, but I haven't done it myself. But there are folks that will sell you a heat pump to drive a hydronic system, and then you may think about integrating that with your hot water system. But I don't have personal experience on that. Let's see what the audience has to say about that. Alan.
Yeah, well, there's a guy who's using the sand and CO2 hot water heat pumps for hydraulic heating systems. I think it's based up Eltham.
Yeah, the Enter shop in Eltham.
Yeah, so fundamentally there's nothing hard about it, but the key difference is that the Sandon type unit doesn't really like to produce water more than about 60-65 degrees, and a traditional hydronic heating system is often running at 85 or something like that, so that either your existing panels would deliver less heat into the house, or you would need larger panels. But if you're upgrading the building, then that's not an issue. So there's nothing hard about it. And in fact, you know, you can actually buy some pretty efficient and quite large capacity swimming pool heat pumps for pool heating. And if you had, you know, in-slope hydronic heating or, you know, things like that kind of technology, they're looking at pretty high coefficients of performance. The best one I've seen is up to 7, I think. So you can certainly, you know, heat a house using heat pumps. My understanding is that this guy up at Eltham often will use a couple of the Sandon units to get enough capacity. But it all depends on what your heating loads are like. You know, again, a very efficient smaller home, one Sandon unit with a big enough storage tank to act as a bit of a buffer should be able to give you your heating and your hot water without any trouble at all.
So they do it by storage, not on demand like the gas house?
Well, yeah, the thing with the Sandon is that it effectively delivers the equivalent of about 5 litres a minute raised from 20 to 60 degrees. Right, so
Instantaneously, essentially.
Effectively in a single pass. And in Japan, some people do actually use the Sandon without a storage tank, like an instant unit, because they, you know, mainly have bars.
For hydronic heating?
No, for their own hot water. Not for hydronic.
The low pressure hot water, essentially.
Well, no, it's all pressurised.
It's only 5 litres a minute.
Yeah, so it's low flow rate.
Low flow, that's what I mean.
But if you work it out, if you dilute it, that's equivalent to running a shower at, you know, 40 degrees or so at about 9 litres a minute. Well, again, there are shower heads around that will do, you know, 5 litres, 6 litres a minute. So you could, in principle, use one of the Sandons as an instantaneous electric water heater. They apparently, when you switch them on, they do have to wind up a bit. Not so much when you switch the water on, but when they start firing up. Yeah, there's no rocket science about hydronic heating using heat pumps, other than we recognise that the higher the temperature you try to achieve, the less efficient your heat pump is.
Now, Alan, you had a meeting with Bacon and they were launching this Nexura radiant heat panel, which is driven by a heat pump and it can do both heating and cooling.
Yeah, and it's got a radiant heat panel. So Dakin essentially are moving into the European market and recognise that in Europe a lot of people want a hydronic type radiant comfort. So that Nexura panel has radiant surfaces with like the refrigerant pipes running behind it, and it also has a fan. So now again, when you look at it, the refrigerant's not running that hot. So one of these things wouldn't heat an uninsulated Victorian brick house. But if you've got, you know, a passive house in Europe, these kinds of things would provide enough heating most of the time to run it without the fan, but the fan's there to give you boosted heat output for warming up the house, you know, first thing and stuff like that. And also the fan's there so that you can do cooling with it as well. So I mean, what we're seeing, we're still in early days because I think, you know, historically the reverse cycle air conditioner has been seen as mainly a cooling device, and the heating has been, you know, a subsidiary factor. What we're now seeing is much more recognition that these things can be serious heating. And of course the ground source, you know, they often call them geothermal heat pumps, have been being used for heating.
In Europe?
In lots of places. Canada, the US, there's a few of them around here. And again, they're just a big heat pump, and the only difference is instead of using ambient air as the heat source, you've got more stable ground temperature.
Well, since then, what you're talking about, I've got the sound in hot water. And what's quite frustrating to me in the summer is
There's all that cooling.
it's cooling my side lane. You go outside and it's
Beautiful.
cool out there. It's freezing if I was painting the fence in winter, mind you. But it would be so much more sensible if it was taking its air in from inside the house and blowing it back out to inside the house rather than outside in the summer.
This is where you
And
can.
it's just common sense that is, but
Well, no, it's not common sense. It depends on what you do, how you see things. It's like you've got a much more complex installation and a lot more on-site labour to do things like that, relative to just buying another split system for not that much money. And so there's a big trade-offs. It's like, if you look, people over the years have done things like trying to, get the heating from your fridge to do useful things. But when you've got a really efficient fridge, it's like it's 30 watts or something. It's not much good, so it's not really worth it. And so it is about practical options. And the problem when you combine several appliances in one is if one function breaks, you have trouble, which is why, the built-in DVD TV was never a great success because people wanted to be able to have the flexibility to upgrade or, if one broke, you have to throw the whole thing out. So it's a tricky area.
Say, Alan, maybe a few words on industrial heat pumps, or just if you could paint an idea for folks of an application of an industrial heat pump.
Yeah, okay. Well, the International Energy Agency, which is like the global association of governments, runs a number of things they call their tasks. And task 35 is the heat pump people. And they've just recently released a really interesting report for people like me, because historically the general consensus has been that heat pumps can't deliver heat above about 90 degrees very efficiently. But what's now coming through, there we go. Yep. What's now coming through is that there's now in Japan a heat pump that can deliver steam at 120 to 165 degrees. And this is a pretty exciting development because enormous amounts of gas are used in industry to produce steam for all sorts of purposes. And when you actually look at the steam systems in industry, they're appallingly efficient because you've got all these steam pipes going everywhere and steam leaking out of them and the condensate doesn't get returned and they're just shocking. Whereas these kinds of units can be a modular unit that you can plonk next to where you need the steam. And so there's exciting developments going on with all of that. The other thing which also that same report talks about is that they're now moving towards what they're calling cascaded heat pumps, which are essentially two heat pumps in series. And what you get by doing that, the efficiency of the heat pump is significantly higher if it has a lower temperature difference across it. So if you put two, one after the other, one feeding off the other one, you can get high efficiency over a larger temperature difference. And in fact, Daikin have a commercial product in the US, which is a cascaded heat pump, which can run at minus 20 degrees and deliver your hot water and your space heating and works at very high efficiencies. So these are the kinds of things that are starting to come through. Likewise, in Japan, you can actually buy a Sandon type unit, going back to your point about the frustration of the cold air. In commercial applications, there are heat pumps up to 80 kilowatts in Japan, which actually are designed so you can draw off the cool and the heat. And these things are running at an overall coefficient of performance of 8 or 9. So when you count both the cooling for your fridge and the heating for your hot water, you are getting 9 units of useful energy per unit of electricity from these things.
So when do you think we'll see? When do you think you'll see ARENA or the Clean Energy Finance Corporation or someone sponsoring a demonstration of that sort of thing in this country?
Yeah. Well, depends how quickly we're successful in getting our applications. Look, the work's all being done. Japan is the leader. And the work's all there, and that report, has it all in it. And it's really a matter of Australians reading those reports and then bringing some of them in. And one of the frustrations we have is, for example, if you look at the Sandon heat pump, that is one of a range of products which are all called the EcoCute heat pump systems. They all use carbon dioxide as the refrigerant. They are all very efficient. And similar design. They were designed as a competitor to the instantaneous gas water heater in Japan. So Mitsubishi, Panasonic, Fujitsu, they all make these heat pump water heaters in Japan. Sandon are the only ones who bother bringing them in Australia.
I don't know if it's what you're looking for, but there's a company, the local company in Denmark, who produce bolt-on heat pumps.
Yeah, the Siemens one.
Yeah. And it can be converted to solar.
Yeah. The Siemens is by far the best of the Australian product, but it still can't stack up really against the Sandon type eco-ones. The Siemens claims a COP of 3.6. That's 3.6 units of heat per unit of electricity. The Sandon's 4.5. The Sandon's required it too.
How's the pricing down?
I don't know, I think they're fairly similar. The bolt-on, the Siemens bolt-on, one thing it's got that's really nice is it's got a diagnostic system built into it, so it actually tracks its efficiency. And if its efficiency starts to deviate from what it should be, it will give you a warning, which is, I'd like to see that on a lot more appliances, including fridges and all sorts of things, to tell you when they are faulty, instead of chugging along wasting your electricity. I think the earthworker people down in the Latrobe Valley are working with the bolt-on people.
Yeah, that's right. They're just advertised.
Yeah. So, as I say, look, I quite like the bolt-on, and in fact, if you actually, when I did look at the prices a while ago, and I can't claim because they kept moving, if you use some of the money that you save by buying the bolt-on to buy a fairly small extra area of PV to drive the bolt-on, you could offset the lower efficiency with some PV, and overall would stack up very well. The difference is that the Sandon uses this carbon dioxide refrigerant technology, which is technically difficult because it operates at very high pressure, which means it has to be beautifully made. Whereas Siemens are buying in a fairly conventional heat pump unit with a conventional refrigerant to do it. So, that's way ahead of all the other Australian product. And in fact, one of the problems we face is that 2 or 3 years ago, the Commonwealth Government had someone test a whole range of the heat pump water heaters, and basically most of them are not very impressive at all, particularly in cold weather. And a lot of them are very noisy too. So the Siemens, I think, is a really good response to the critique by the Commonwealth Government. But the Japanese stuff's pretty impressive.
Yeah, on the conversation article today, you get all these comments underneath there, and somebody writes, heat pump hot water units are noisy. And I write, what can I do? I write a comment, I say, some heat pump hot water heaters are not noisy. Yes. So, check the specifications. And
the Sandon is something like 38 decibels or something. You can have you got
Sandon is fantastic.
Right.
Siddons, I had a bad experience with and got rid of it.
Right.
So I went straight to Sandon.
Any other questions before I come to my last, most important point?
Well, what is causing the drop in demand? do you know what the main factor of why 2012 was the peak?
Sorry, for gas.
For gas,
So electricity was 2008, I think.
Yeah, look, it's a bit of a plateau up there, isn't it? The differences aren't that significant, and there can even be weather factors. So like this year, we've had a particularly cold winter, so we may actually see that gas demand goes back up above some of these recent years because of the cold weather. Hugh Sadler publishes the CDEX, which gets put on Renew Economy and other places. You can read about that. He's thinking he's starting to see some increase in the use of gas in industry for whatever reasons. It's possible there's some cheap price deals on gas still before all the LNG plants fully start up. And then power generation is the big wild card, and that is definitely collapsing right now. It's again, there were some cheap deals on gas as the LNG plants started up. They called it ramp gas, where with the coal seams, you got to de-water the coal seams and get the gas flowing, and then you dare not stop. So it's not like a simple conventional oil and gas well where you can turn the valve on and it comes out and you can shut it off and it stops, you can turn it on again and it comes out. But you got to de-water the coal seams, and then you got to keep that gas flowing, which means you got to do something with it. So they've been flogging gas for a period of time while waiting for the LNG trains to get fully started up with that ramp gas. But now we're starting to see that collapse a fair bit. So I'd say probably one could answer your question if you spend a lot of time looking at what AEMO's published there over the last few years. I haven't bothered to do that because it was a bit of a plateau, and you could look at all the different ones and say, oh yeah, okay, it was a bit of a warmer summer, but that happened in industry and that happened in power generation. You can try and figure it out. So it's a bit more detail than what I've got into. But for the future,
it doesn't matter in a way, does it?
no, that's right. It's the past, and the future is that certainly gas demand use is collapsing in power generation. Industry, we might see some uptick, but then the trend there is expected to be down. And buildings from a year to year will be a function of the weather to a certain extent. These things can be compensated for. There's this heating degree day technology where you can look at how much wind there is and the temperatures and solar energy and try and work out, just for weather to try and normalize things from year to year and try to understand what's going on. But it can be a bit tricky. And one more question maybe then I wanted to make the last important point. So we manage, there's one more question.
Could you hide a heat pump in a cellar?
In North America, they do some interesting things because you can't just leave your water equipment outside in North America, it freezes. And so they even find they have like their hot water heat pumps inside the house, which then means that if all that cold air coming out of the heat pump is cooling off the house, then you got to heat up the house to pull that heat back out again. So they have those challenges, but you need to be able to get a fair bit of air and energy to these things. So that's where you look at the placement. If your device, mostly you're going to use it for heating, like water heating, then they would say put it in a sunny location where you might pick up some warmer temperatures. But if you're mostly using it for cooling, then you'd want to stick it out the back somewhere on the south side of the house, so there's some cooler temperatures to work with. So.
But if you put the unit in a large enough
space,
it's basically like a geothermal heat pump. You're using the ground temperature. It's a question of whether you get enough heat transfer to the ground.
I live in the Central Highlands at the moment in Tassie, and it gets up to -9 in winter. And it would be good to find a way to efficiently heat the place.
Well,
yeah, but like I said,
there are some companies with some heat pumps that they specifically promote for the colder regions.
Well, I've been talking about heat pumps down there, and everywhere it's too cold here for heat.
Yeah, well, there's lots of stereotyping.
Yeah, so now I realise it's, my problem with air conditioners and first time is, you go and stay somewhere and you can't sleep at night because the air conditioners are so noisy. I mean, that would be an issue for me.
Yeah, but again, it's a question of the design of the technology, and some of the air conditioners now they're required, but you have to look at the noise ratings in the specification sheets to be able to find one that's quiet.
But also depends on where the other half is.
Yes.
Well, but they give you the noise ratings.
Yeah, well, I'm at a mistake in my place. I've got a clerestory roof, so I like bathroom and the
compressors on the low half of the roof. And I found that the noise came in the clearance windows, which I then double glazed, and the noise doesn't come in here.
Oh, there you go.
But it would have been smarter, but I sort of thought others, I could just as easily put them on the other roof and they'd be completely out of the way.
But now you've got double glazing as well. What's the problem?
Yeah, well,
Sounds good.
Well, it's secondary glazing.
Yeah, and our ducted gas, before we renovated our bedroom and made it a lot warmer, we used to have to heat at night with ducted gas, and that would wake me up. You know, so it's not like ducted gas is completely quiet either. And in fact, I can, through the double glazed windows, I can hear my neighbor's ducted gas clicking on and going. Well, they got a furnace that's like this. It's from 1942 or something. I don't know. So.
My neighbour's hundreds of metres away.
Yeah. Very good. Well, the last important point I wanted to make was that we got a lot of media here with this go around, but it wasn't enough. And so I would like to encourage folks, whether there's volunteers or others, that we should all get together and do a bit of strategizing about what we do next winter. Like I said, you know, Sunrise was interested, but then said, oh, look, winter's over. And like the Herald Sun rang me up today and said, oh, gee, I was going to run that story, but I see The Age already ran it. So, you know, there's things that can catch you out on the media side. But what I think we need going into next winter, and this is if we're interested in helping Victorians to save money, and if we're interested in helping Victorians to move from gas to electricity, and then there's a big prize out there, and it should be an easy sell because there's a lot of money involved. But I think we need to get that heat you later produced so that the calculations are very easy for folks. But I think it would also be useful if we had, like, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 10 case studies. You know, my place is one, but there's so many different combinations of gas and reverse cycle heaters. But if we were able to work with people, maybe people that would present well on a television camera, that we could work through some case studies. And maybe it's too late this winter to get the data. Maybe we need to get the data in June, and then you're ready in July to have your media push, and to be able to say, right, here's one way that it worked out that electric was better, and here's another way it worked out that electric was better, and here's one way it worked out that there wasn't much difference. You know, be honest about that. But to get that information out in front of people, you would get on the 7:30 report, you would get on a current affair, you would get on these television shows, because there's, and particularly relevant to Victoria, because there's big savings to be had. So I'd encourage any volunteers or others that think this is an important issue to start to get some heads together, you know, after Christmas, and start to think about it, how it can be done to get the word out there. Because this wasn't enough. This was a story in The Age, guy talking on radio here and there. It is not suddenly going to drive millions of people to switch. The government, unlikely to do a huge amount. You might get some support here and there. But in the next year, you know, they're unlikely to do a huge amount. I think we'll see the change in 10 years. But if you'd rather see the change in a year or two, well, then if there's a push, it's a big rock sitting on the edge, it's just ready to be pushed over.
Would you please thank Tim? We would invite you to join us to continue the discussion over drink and food at the pub, the bar, just down the ramp and before the next of the lights. You can catch up on the YouTube recordings, which Roger so capably does, and download some slides at the BZE website, bze.org.au/events/discussion-group. And the discussion group, of course, is part of BZE's activities, all of which cost money to keep going. And if you'd like to donate to BZE to keep it all going, we'd be very happy to hear from you. There'll be some forms outside on the table which you can fill in if you'd like to become cutely known as a Bayside supporter. The next discussion group is on the 5th of October, and the guest speaker at this stage is a secret, so stay tuned to the website. I'd like to remind you that BZE are having a film night screening of Cowspiracy on Wednesday the 23rd of September at 6:30 at the Kathleen Syme Library. And in passing, I'd just like to invite Chloe from Friends of the Earth to come and say a few words. She's got a project on the go. And that's it from us. Thanks, Chloe.
Hi guys, I'm Chloe, and Laura and I are from Friends of the Earth, and we're working on the unconventional gas campaign for about 3 years now. And Tim's research has obviously particular significance for us, because if we can mine for gas in our homes and in our attics, then we don't have to frack the farm. So it's been really fantastic that that Tim and had had this light bulb of an idea at the time, and we've got a state inquiry into unconventional gas happening at the moment, and we think we've got a moratorium on unconventional gas mining in Victoria at the moment, and we think we can extend that, if not achieve a total ban on unconventional gas by the end of the year. So I just wanted to let you know about an event we're having in a couple of weeks' time. On the 20th of September, we're having a rally to declare Victoria gas bill free. We've had 64 communities, nearly 67 by the end of the week, who have declared themselves gas bill free, who've said they're not going to negotiate with these unconventional gas companies, and they're going to do whatever it takes to keep unconventional gas mining off their farms and out of their communities. And we're holding this statewide declaration event to say both rural communities and our urban community aren't going to let it happen wherever it starts. So it'd be really fantastic to see you guys there, and there are flyers and a petition out in the hallway. Thanks very much.
12 o'clock at the
Oh, okay, yeah.